On today's show, the Indiana Pacers are now up 3-1 against the Giannis and Dame-less Milwaukee Bucks. How Tyrese Haliburton and the young Pacers are settling into their first taste of postseason basketball, and why the Pacers front court is such a mismatch nightmare for the Bucks. It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brands that she loves the most, delivered the very same day right to her doorstep with DoorDash. Look, I'll be honest, sometimes Mother's Day can sneak up on you. It shows up out of nowhere sometimes, even though it's the same time every year, but you want to make sure your mom feels special on Mother's Day, right? And what better way than to start her day off with a surprise gift sent right to her doorstep via DoorDash. Maybe you can't be there in the morning to greet her or to hand her the gift yourself, but you can make sure that she knows that you're thinking about her by showing her maybe she has a sweet tooth, right? Or maybe she's a bit of a tech enthusiast or a beauty connoisseur, or maybe she's a little bit outdoorsy, right? No matter what she's into, you can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and so much more available via DoorDash. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's Locked On NBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Pacers, Tony East. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcast, and on YouTube, just search Locked On Pacers. And Tony, no Giannis, no Dame, and the Pacers now go up 3-1 against the Milwaukee Bucks after a 126-113 Game 4 win. Now let's start right there. Look, obviously you have to play whoever is in front of you, at any time of year in the NBA season, but obviously even more importantly in the playoffs. But how much has losing Giannis and now Dame obviously kind of tilted this series in favor of the Pacers?
Yeah, quite a bit, right? And they beat Dame twice, but it's clear even in those games that as the game goes on, Dame becomes less effective, whether that's due to his age or injury. It doesn't really matter. Like, it's hard for him to do what he has to do without Giannis anyway in a lot of these games. So, Doc Rivers saying that he has to use him as a decoy and Dame being in the corner a lot in the second halves of these games, like that has been such a big part of this. But to the Pacers' credit, they're not winning. They're smoking them twice now. They have 2 double-digit wins in the series. They were up 20 after the first quarter of the game that went to overtime. Like, they found ways to be very successful against the Bucks. It doesn't help that the Bucks' fourth best player ejected 7 minutes into Game 4 of Pacers-Bucks. But it's obviously been pretty much the national story of the series is Giannis and Dame's health status. But yeah, to the Pacers' credit, as you say, they can only play the team across from them, and once they got over the playoff jitters of being a young team playing their first playoff game, they've been the better team for 3 straight games.
Yeah, Bobby Portis decided that it wasn't enough of a handicap to go without Giannis and Dame. He was like, I'll spot you guys one more rotation player. How about that? How do you feel that Tyrese Haliburton is kind of handling his first taste of postseason basketball? To me, first couple games in, right, it seemed like he was playing maybe the best word I can come up with is timid a little bit, just in not hunting his shot. We know he's a guy, he loves to get his teammates involved. He loves to create for others, but it often feels like, Haliburton is at his best when he's also being aggressive, looking for his shot. And it's felt like he's been a different player these past 2 games of the series.
For sure. It's been really this is his first playoffs. And I know that, everybody knows that, but it's been really interesting to kind of see him feel out a series setting. He's so naturally pass first, and the Bucks rightly, sent 2 to him a lot in Game 1, and that lets Siakam just go bananas. And then they were a little softer with that in Game 2, and so Haliburton shot 10 times instead of 7, and Siakam still just went bananas. And then in Game 3, finally, they were like, all right, let's send 2 to Siakam. And then Haliburton was like, great, I can shoot 22 times now. So some of it, I think, is him figuring out what the playoffs truly is, what his pass-first mentality is going to mean in that setting, right? How aggressive he's going to have to be hunting his shot. And then in Game 3, he shot 22 times, and he had a triple-double, the first Pacers playoff triple-double in a half decade, and obviously hit the game-winning shot. Clearly gradual progress and ascent, and then 24 now, his playoff career high he had earlier tonight. So I think part of it is what you said, feeling out the playoffs, seeing what it's like. Part of it, I think, too, has been working through the Bucks coverages as they continue to adjust. And every game, the Pacers have someone in their front court sniff or hit 30 points. And that's where they've really exploited the Bucks. And I think a lot of that is both the attention and passing that Haliburton can have. So, yeah, he still hasn't been that 24 and 12 guy that he was every night for the first 3 months of the season. But these last 2 games are as close as he's been in the postseason. And obviously for them to reach their ceiling, he's going to have to be that every game, but he clearly looks better than he did early in the series, and that's very good for the Pacers.
Mentioned, the Pacers front court has had some really spectacular games so far this series. Pascal Siakam was a bit of a monster those first couple of games, right? Had posted 36 and 37 points respectively in the first 2 games of the series. He's down though these past couple games, games 3, game 4, down to 17 and then 13 here in the game 4 win. What's been the biggest difference in his play across this series, especially these last couple games where the scoring is kind of, regressed a little bit here?
Yeah, he was so good in the first 2 games. I mean, I you can disagree, listen or whatever, but like I argued after 2 games, he was the best player in the playoffs of anybody in the NBA, right? Like he was that good for the first 2 games. Dame, Jokic, all these guys have been really good, whatever. Doesn't matter. The fact that he was in that discussion alone is like the Bucks have to go, oh crap, we have to defend him differently. And their front court, especially without Giannis in the series, is a little older, right? Brook Lopez is a very good defender. He's not the fastest guy. Bobby Portis is a little quicker, but not as good defensively as Brook Lopez. And so one of them is going to guard Myles Turner. The other one's going to guard Siakam. The first 2 games, Brook Lopez was cross-matching onto Siakam more. He just cooked that. He's too fast for Brook Lopez a lot of the time. And so not only did they switch it, they started to double him more in game 3. So he just moved the ball a lot, right? He was passing. His assist total was 4 in that game. It was 7 tonight, so he's moving the ball really well still. He's still getting good looks, but that's what this switched. And so part of what him being worse is he's now being guarded by a different player. Well, now Brook Lopez is on Myles Turner, who's had 2 29-point games in a row. So I think that's just something the Bucks have to figure out how to work through and give up. Because maybe they have to change how they're defending other guys that lets the guards just have big nights, because so far they haven't found a way to contain both front court guys for the Pacers. And so Siakam dropping in effectiveness statistically has mostly been that they're just playing through Myles Turner instead, because he's now the one who can exploit these coverages.
A little bit of pick your poison, unfortunately, from the Milwaukee Bucks at this point. Just not a great matchup kind of across the board when you're down so many key pieces. And again, you've got guys who present matchup issues like a Pascal Siakam on the other end that you've got to figure out some way to try and slow down. And then, of course, right there, Myles Turner right across the way as well. What's been, to you, the most important thing that this Pacers team can either, can learn or has learned from this series that they can hopefully take into round 2, assuming that the Bucks are all but kind of officially cooked with no Giannis and no Dame on the table anymore?
Yeah, it's hard to say what the end of the series will look like, right? Like if there is a 3-1 comeback that everyone could predict, it would be the Bucks getting Giannis and Dame back with 2 home games to go in a series, right? Like that's totally possible, but who knows how good they'll be. And if they're even able to actually play, and if Middleton, like he went to the locker room again in game 4, like what's his, there's a lot of hurdles in this, but the Pacers have learned about the playoffs. That matters a lot, right? Like I'm not even going to be nice. They sucked in game 1. They were terrible. They scored 94 points. It was the fewest points they've scored in a game all season, including the regular season.
They didn't look like themselves in game 1.
Oh, they didn't look like, not even themselves. They didn't look like an NBA team. Like they were awful. They were down 30 in the first half. It was terrible. And they'll never admit it because no one wants to admit this week, just like they weren't ready for the playoffs. They just weren't, right? That happens to a lot of teams. Remember when the Magic beat the Raptors in game 1 a couple of years ago? Like this just happens sometimes to younger teams in postseason settings.
We just saw it happen with the Thunder. They didn't look ready in game 1.
Yeah, they didn't look good either. They needed a miracle to win it at the end, right? Shout out to the Timberwolves, who I guess they made the playoffs last year, but they just look, the experience helped them. The Cavs last year, I could go on and on. Whatever. They immediately looked better in game 2. They knew what it takes. They have someone like Siakam who's won a championship to kind of guide them. So I hate that this is like the boring like TV guy answer to answer this question, but it's like experience. They have experience. They know what the playoffs are like. They know what the physicality is like. They know what the setting is like. They know what the crowd is like and how they feed off of that to play really well. Credit to their leaders for that, and credit to their basketball play for adjusting to how bad they were in game 1 and being really good every other game in this series. And I think they'll go into, look, I would not pick them to beat either of the teams they would play in round 2, but they'll be better to start that series. And they have enough potency to beat anybody, and they're ready for it now. I think that's a huge deal to them.
Will the Pacers be able to close this thing out in game 5? Will we see Giannis or Dame make a return this series? You're going to have us covered for all that and so much more over at Locked On Pacers. Tony, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.